Hello and greetings. Pesach, or Passover in English, for 2021 will be celebrated from March 27th through April the 4th. The first Seder will be on Saturday, March 27th, after nightfall, and the second Seder will be on Sunday, March 28th, also after nightfall. From late morning on Saturday, March 27th, and continuing for the duration of the 8 days of Passover, leaven products are strictly avoided. If you are in need of anything Passover related, reach out to your Jewish chaplain or your CRM. What is Passover? The story in a nutshell is that Passover commemorates the emancipation of the Israelites from slavery in ancient Egypt. Passover is observed by avoiding leaven and is highlighted by the Seder meals that include 4 cups of wine, eating matzah and bitter herbs, and retelling the story of the Exodus. In Hebrew, it is known as Pesach, which means to pass over, because God passed over the Jewish homes when killing the Egyptian firstborns on the very first Passover Eve. As told in the Bible, after many decades of slavery to the Egyptian pharaohs, during which time the Israelites were subjected to back-breaking labor and unbearable horrors, God saw the people's distress and sent Moses to Pharaoh with a message: "Send forth my people, so that they may serve me." But despite numerous warnings, Pharaoh refused to heed God's command. God then sent upon Egypt 10 devastating plagues, afflicting them and destroying everything from their livestock to their crops. At the stroke of midnight on the 15th of the Hebrew month of Nisan, in the year 2448 from creation, which correlates to the year 1313 BCE, God visited the last of the 10 plagues on the Egyptians, killing all their firstborn. While doing so, God spared the children of Israel by passing over their homes, hence the name of the holiday. Pharaoh's resistance was broken, and he virtually chased his former slaves out of the land. The Israelites left in such a hurry, in fact, that the bread they baked as provisions for the way did not have time to rise. But is it really necessary to commemorate and celebrate our ancestors' freedom from slavery and bondage in Egypt more than 3,000 years ago? Can't we move on to more pressing and contemporary issues? To answer this question, we have to understand what the word Pesach really means, as well as another word, Mitzrayim. Pesach, as mentioned, means Passover. It is the season of liberation when we pass over all obstacles to inner freedom. On Passover, we give our souls a chance to be expressed. The Seder is not just a memorial to events of the distant past. It is a dynamic process of freedom from the challenges of the present. We are slaves to our own inhibitions, fears, habits, cynicism, and prejudices. These self-appointed pharaohs are layers of ego that prevent us from expressing our true inner self, from reaching our spiritual potential. Our souls are incarcerated in selfishness, laziness, and indifference. So how do we free ourselves? By eating matzah. After eating matzah, the Israelites were able to run out of Egypt and follow God into the desert, because matzah represents the suspension of ego. Unlike bread, which has body and taste, matzah is flat and tasteless, the bread of surrender. Usually we are scared to suspend our egos because we think that we will lose ourselves. On Pesach, we eat the matzah. We suspend our egos and find ourselves, our true selves. The Festival of Passover, the season of our liberation, comes around every year, not merely to remind us of the liberation of our ancestors from Egyptian bondage, but also to inspire us to strive for a greater measure of self-liberation and all limitations and distractions which may impede us. And this pertains more to the inner self than to outside factors, which are often beyond our control. Because there are two parts to being enslaved. There is the physical circumstance of slavery, the torturous existence of being subjected day after day to the merciless whip of the taskmaster. But there is also psychological slavery, the slave's mindset and conviction. And this is where the second word, Mitzrayim, comes into play. The word for Egypt in Hebrew is Mitzrayim, which shares its etymological root with Metzer, meaning boundaries. Mitzrayim denotes limitations, which we all have to certain degrees, some more severe than others. But the common denominator is that these are the circumstances that constrain us. We may become freed from our external Egypt, but if Pharaoh has come out with us, essentially he continues to have full control, mastering our psyche. Our specific set of circumstances may have improved, but our life's tumultuous inner terrain remains the same. It's easy to think of ourselves as free when we have overcome an externally imposed limitation. We may be shocked, however, to discover that Pharaoh still pursues us, even after we've escaped his Egypt. But the abuser closing in on us is the same Pharaoh that we've allowed to accompany us. It's our own internal shackles. That even once freed from the abuse or suffering of our past, we may still be living a life inhibited by our very own fear, pain, or trauma. On the seventh day of Passover, we celebrate the splitting of the Red Sea. Even once they had been redeemed from Egypt, the Jews remained fearful of the Egyptians' great might and power. Only after the sea split and they saw the Egyptians dead on the seashore could they finally experience complete liberation. But why did God insist on taking the people through the sea? It was completely out of the way to Israel. God led them on a detour which trapped them between the sea and the chasing Egyptians. The earth is comprised of oceans and continents, sea and dry land. The difference between the two is that on dry land, all is open and visible. The trees, animals, mountains, and people that occupy it are all easily recognizable. The sea, on the other hand, is a vast blue expanse of mystery. Though the sea is teeming with life, when you look at it, you can identify nothing. All is hidden beneath the surface. So it is with a person. Our personality has two layers, our sea and our land. What we know of ourselves, our visible strengths, our tested talents, and our known abilities, the elements of our character that we are aware of, these comprise the dry land of our personality. But below the surface of our character lies a vast sea of latent talents, inner strengths, and untapped abilities that we never knew we had. In the depth of our soul lies a reserve of dormant energy waiting to be discovered. This is our sea, and even we ourselves are unaware of what lies there. How can we access this reservoir of potential? How can our sea become dry land? There is only one way, and we know it from the encounter at the Red Sea. The Israelites had their back to the wall, Egyptians closing in on one side, a raging sea threatening on the other. They had only two options: despair or faith. Logic and reason demanded that they give in. There was no possible way out of their predicament. But faith demanded that they keep on marching to the promised land. Because sea or no sea, this is the path on which God has led us. So we have to have faith and march on. And so they did. It was at that moment, when hopelessness was countered by faith, that the impossible happened and the sea opened up to become dry land. The most formidable obstacle dissolved into nothingness, without a struggle, just with faith. The people became empowered exactly when they acknowledged God as the only true power. By surrendering themselves to a higher force, they discovered the force within themselves. They split their own sea. And this is how we eradicate the demons from our inner world and transcend the personal Egypt within ourselves as well. The Jewish people are no strangers to times of challenge. At the very birth of our nation, we needed to learn how to face these challenges. So God took us on a detour to the sea and opened it up for us. He was telling every Jew and humanity as a whole, for all times, obstacles are not interruptions to the journey. They are the journey. Keep marching forward to the promised land, and every challenge along the way will give you a deeper insight and a renewed power. Just have faith, and it will split your sea. The main theme of Passover is freedom. But what is true freedom? Freedom is commonly perceived as the removal of all external constraints on a person's development and self-expression. Freedom is the natural state of man. This line of reasoning implies that free him of all outside forces that limit and inhibit him, and you have a free human being. Passover embodies a far more ambitious freedom. The exodus from Egypt, which marked the end of Israel's subjugation to their Egyptian enslavers, was but the first step of a 7-week journey, a 49-step climb in the conquest and transcendence of self that culminated in our receiving the Torah at Mount Sinai on the Festival of Shavuot. Nor does Shavuot represent the final realization of freedom. At Sinai, we were granted the potential and the challenge to attain yet a deeper dimension of liberty and self-transcendence. Standing before Pharaoh, Moses did not merely demand in the name of God that he let my people go, but let my people go that they may serve me. What is the significance of this liberating service? It means that man, no matter how free of external constraints, is a finite creature, ever subject to the limits of his own nature and character. That to attain true freedom, he must therefore transcend his humanity, his emotional, intellectual, even spiritual self, and access the spark of godliness that is his infinite supra-human self. The Torah, God's blueprint for life on earth, outlines the observances and practices that enable us to realize our divine essence in our daily lives. The day we left the borders of Egypt, we were free in the conventional sense. No longer could an alien taskmaster dictate what we must or may not do. We then proceeded to also free ourselves of the alien influences that constrained us from within the pagan habits and mindset that centuries of subjection to the depraved culture of Egypt had imposed on us. and our own inborn negative inclinations. Then, at Sinai, we were empowered to strive for yet a deeper dimension of freedom. A freedom that is not the negation of adversarial forces and influences, but the surmounting of our own positive psychic and behavioral patterns. There is nothing negative about our human potential, but we are capable of more, of raising our achievements to a level in relation to which yesterday's liberated self is limited and subjective. Thus our holy sages have said, in every generation, a person must see himself as if he has himself come out from Mitzrayim. The Hebrew word for Egypt, Mitzrayim, as mentioned earlier, means boundaries. And the endeavor to free ourselves from yesterday's boundaries is a perpetual one. For freedom is more than the drive to escape foreign and negative inhibitors. No matter how free of them we are, we remain defined by the boundaries of self and self-definition. Freedom is the incessant drive to pass over these boundaries, to draw on our divine, infinite potential to constantly overreach what we are. So I wish you all blessings for a kosher and happy Pesach and for true freedom. Freedom from both material worries and spiritual worries, from anything that stands in the way of serving God with joy and gladness of heart, and to carry forward this freedom and joy throughout the year. And to take this freedom, to take this joy, to take this gladness of heart, and bring it to others, share it with others, and together, perhaps slowly, we will change the world to a much better, brighter place, a place where freedom becomes true freedom, a place where there are no inhibitions, a place where there is no subjugation, a place where ourselves, within ourselves, we let go. We let go and we become that much better. We let go and we are able to help others that much better. This is the message of Pesach, of Passover. This is the message which Pesach continues to teach us over 3,000 years later. 3,000 bitter years of exile. But we have the potential to overcome it, to overreach it, to rise above it. But it begins with personal freedom. Personal removal of all bondage and boundaries. But there is one very important distinction to make and to remember. And that is, to attain freedom is not merely about leaving a yoke of bondage behind. It is about a clear vision of a new paradigm for a better world. Otherwise, the revolution will be a true revolution. It will revolve a full 360 degrees. And the same ingrained patterns will reassert themselves, and sometimes even worse. A true revolution needs to be one of 180 degrees, a whole new direction. And we see this theme articulated throughout the Passover story that we just spoke about. And it began at the burning bush. God tells Moses to instruct Pharaoh, "Shalach ami v'ya'avduni." Let my people go, that they may serve me. Just letting the people go is not going to accomplish anything in the long run if they're not going to something. To something, that's the alternative. Indeed, the antithesis to Egypt. Most significantly, the encounter at the burning bush takes place at Mount Sinai, where the Jews would be given the Torah, a truly revolutionary document that would, through the agency of the Jewish people, transform and empower all of humanity. So let us rise above the Mitzrayim, the constraints, the boundaries, the bondages. We suffer under these constraints of the habits we maintain simply because we had them yesterday. We are slaves to ingrained pathways of our lives and of our world because we are too busy dusting the covers of our book of life to read its pages. On Passover, and especially at the Seder, we put all else aside to concentrate on receiving the power of freedom that flows from God to each one of us. But for this experience to have a lasting effect, we need to remember that not only do we have to leave the old habits, the let my people go, but we need a vision and program of the new, that they may serve me. Otherwise, we end up not far from where we started from. The Hebrew term ve'ya'avduni, that they may serve me, actually means that they may transform themselves through me. When we look to the Torah, the receiving of which is the sole purpose of the Exodus, we discover that the freedom to realize the potential of every aspect of our being lies within its confines. Every area of life stands ready to yield purpose, meaning, and fulfillment if we are willing to dare to be truly free. Truly free is not freedom from the bondage of whichever pharaoh, king, or czar happens to be oppressing us at this moment, but freedom from the bondage of all self-imposed limits on our capacity to truly realize our own godly potential.
Greetings, my name is Rabbi Kryman, the Jewish chaplain at Ironwood State Prison and Chuckawalla Valley State Prison, and I'm here to give you a message about Passover and the ensuing holidays. We see that starting from the second night of Passover, we count for 7 weeks. The Omer, we count every day, and during this counting, it's not just counting up towards Matan Torah, the day that we celebrate receiving the Torah, but it's also where we prepare ourselves to accept the Torah. And this idea of preparation is a recurring theme we see in the Jewish faith, whether it's just 30 days before the holiday, making sure that we have the proper items to celebrate the holiday, or like we see by Elul, the last Jewish month of the Jewish year, we take a full month to prepare for Rosh Hashanah, the Jewish New Year. Same thing is similar to the 7 weeks of counting, preparing ourselves for Shavuos. It says that we take, there are 7 characteristics, which I will say in Hebrew and English. There is chesed, which is kindness, gevura, which is holding back and restraint, tiferes, which is beauty and compassion, chesed, gevura. Then there's netzach, which is endurance, hod, which is humility, yesod, which is bonding and foundation. The last one is malchus, which is leadership. And we take these different characteristics and find within ourselves how we can refine our being to be better people. One example is how we take our kindness and restraint and we take it together is the idea of rain. Rain is a beautiful blessing, but it's a blessing because it comes in a small quantity. If God were to pour upon water into fields, it would just flood it up and would be the opposite of a blessing. It would devastate the fields. But because God uses the kindness of rain, He gives water, but also restrains and holds back to little drops. It is a blessing. So we look at ourselves and see how we can have kindness in these different combinations of our characteristics. Another thing is something that's a little bit easier to refine is our thought, speech, and action, which in the mystics call it the garments of our soul. Just like a garment you can take on and take off and interchange it very easily, so too with our thought, speech, and action. For instance, if you take for a moment and think about a tree, whether it's a big sequoia tree or a great oak tree, a palm tree, each tree has a very different look to it. The leaves are different. Some trees can produce fruits. You have apple trees and lemon trees. And now if you just pause for 1 minute, I'm sure when you woke up this morning you weren't thinking about trees. But as I'm talking to you about trees, now you can take your thoughts and aim towards thinking about what you would like to. So in the same process, when it comes to refining ourselves, we have the power to change our thought and to think about anything we want. We can think positive thoughts, thoughts of hope, thoughts of courage. And I just want to end off with the blessing that we should have a very, very happy and healthy Passover. We should try and remember to refine ourselves, use these 7 weeks, starting from the second night of Passover all the way to Shavuos, to look at ourselves and see how we can be better people and how we can change the world. So, greetings and blessings and all the best. Shalom.